The curse in disguise: imagine a world where intelligence is not admired but quietly suffered, where seeing deeply into life's illusions does not empower you but isolates you, and where thinking too much is not a sign of brilliance but a source of existential fatigue. This is not a dystopian fantasy. It is the philosophical terrain explored by Arthur Schopenhauer, who suggested that intelligence, far from being a gift, is often a hidden curse. While society glorifies intellect, associating it with progress and achievement, Schopenhauer dared to ask, what if those who see more actually suffer more? What if the brightest minds are not the happiest, but the most burdened? In a culture that praises self-awareness and insight, we rarely speak about the cost of consciousness, the loneliness, the disillusionment, the quiet despair that comes from seeing the world without its comforting masks. Schopenhauer's philosophy is not interested in illusions of happiness. It is interested in truth, however dark or unsettling that truth may be. And one of the most unsettling truths he proposed was that to be truly intelligent is to become more sensitive to life's inherent futility. The deeper one thinks, the more clearly one sees that many of the promises of life's success, love, meaning are built on fragile illusions that rarely withstand scrutiny. This awareness is not abstract. It affects how one moves through the world, how one relates to others, how one wakes up each morning with a weight that cannot be named but is always felt. To Schopenhauer, this was not melodrama. He believed that the intelligent individual, by virtue of their depth, perceives not only beauty but also the inevitable emptiness that trails behind it. And in that space, between seeing and suffering, lies the paradox we must now explore. Is intelligence truly a virtue, or is it something far more complicated? Something that quietly haunts the very people we think of as gifted? 2. Seeing what others don't, there's a quiet ache that comes with seeing too clearly, a kind of psychic tension that builds not from chaos, but from clarity. Schopenhauer believed that intelligence expands perception, and with that expansion comes the loss of illusions most people depend on to survive. While others believe that love will complete them, that wealth will secure them, that social approval will validate them, the intelligent mind peers through these beliefs and sees them for what they are: temporary distractions from a deeper void. This doesn't make the intelligent cold or cynical. It makes them brutally honest. They recognize that much of what society calls meaning is, in fact, carefully rehearsed performance. The rituals of success, the symbols of happiness, the postures of belonging. But beneath these polished surfaces lies something raw and unresolved, an absence that the intelligent cannot unsee. They walk through life as observers, haunted not by what is wrong, but by how easily others accept it. The world seems content in its distractions, its gossip, its noise. And yet, for the intelligent, these things feel unbearably thin. They crave depth, truth, something unshakable, and yet find themselves surrounded by people who rarely question, who rarely feel the need to ask why. This difference is not just intellectual. It's existential. The intelligent person does not just think differently, they feel differently. They experience the gap between what is and what could be, not as a philosophical idea, but as a lived wound. It hurts to care deeply in a world that values speed over thought, comfort over truth, appearance over substance. And so, the intelligent are not at odds with society because they reject it. They are at odds because they see it too clearly, and in that clarity, they no longer know where they belong. 3. The invisible weight of thought. To think deeply is to carry a weight that cannot be shared. It is not the kind of burden that others can see or even understand, but it shapes everything from how one moves through a room to how one lies awake at night, caught in loops of reflection that never quite resolve. Schopenhauer understood this invisible heaviness. He believed that the more intelligent a person is, the more they are trapped in the web of their own awareness. They don't just feel pain, they analyze it. They don't just encounter disappointment, they dissect its origins, its patterns, its future implications. And in doing so, they often make their suffering more precise, more unbearable. This isn't overthinking in the casual sense, it's existential recursion, a looping of consciousness that refuses to let go. While others find relief in distraction, the intelligent mind returns, again and again, to the questions that can't be answered. Why do we suffer? What is the point of any of this? Why does joy feel so fleeting? These aren't curiosities, they are daily visitors. And with them comes a fatigue that sleep cannot cure. This mental weight isolates in ways that are difficult to articulate. The intelligent often feel that their experiences are too complex, too nuanced, to be shared. They sense that if they were to speak their truth fully, it would be met with confusion, discomfort, or silence. So they stay quiet. They smile when expected. They nod through conversations that feel hollow. But beneath that performance is a storm relentless, unseen, uninvited. This is the hidden tax of intelligence, not just to understand more, but to feel more responsible for what one understands. And in that responsibility, a strange loneliness grows not from being unloved, but from being unreadable. 4. Alone in a crowded room, there's a particular kind of loneliness that arises not from being physically alone, but from standing in the middle of a crowd and feeling completely unseen. For the intelligent, this is not a rare moment, it is a recurring reality. Schopenhauer believed that those with heightened awareness often struggle to find connection, not because they lack social skills, but because they crave something deeper than what most interactions offer. Small talk feels unbearable. Gossip feels corrosive. Discussions about status or trends feel like echoes of a culture obsessed with surface. And so, the intelligent drift, not above others, but beside them, quietly watching, quietly aching. They want to belong, but not at the cost of authenticity. They want to speak, but not if the language requires them to abandon what matters. The result is often a life lived in translation, where the soul speaks in paragraphs, but the world only understands headlines. In this gap between inner complexity and outer simplicity, isolation takes root. It is not the kind of loneliness that craves company, it is the kind that longs to be known, to be understood without needing to explain. But when one's thoughts run deeper than most conversations ever dare to go, that longing becomes a quiet ache, a background hum of disconnection. This is the cost of inner depth in a shallow world. It is the feeling of being a stranger not because you are different, but because you refuse to pretend you are not. The intelligent often learn to play roles smiling, nodding, adapting, but inside, they remain slightly elsewhere, listening to music no one else can hear. And while this solitude can be a sanctuary, it is also a sorrow. Because to be truly seen is not a luxury, it is a need. And when that need goes unmet, no amount of intellect can fill the silence it leaves behind. 5. The boredom that devours the intelligent there is a restlessness that intelligence cannot silence, a constant murmur beneath the surface of daily life, a sense that something essential is missing. Schopenhauer understood this as more than mere dissatisfaction. He saw it as existential boredom, a state that uniquely afflicts the intelligent. While others find contentment in routine, entertainment, or fleeting pleasures, the intelligent quickly sense the hollowness behind the repetition. They crave stimulation, not of the senses, but of the soul. They are not bored because nothing is happening. They are bored because what is happening feels lifeless, uninspired, predictable. It is not a lack of things to do, but a lack of meaning in doing them. The intelligent can walk through museums and conversations, through careers and relationships, and still feel untouched, as if everything they engage with has already been thought through, already been felt, already been seen. This depth of boredom is not laziness. It is the byproduct of heightened perception, of an inner world so rich that the outer world can rarely keep pace. And in this mismatch, the mind begins to turn inward, not in peace, but in desperation. It starts asking questions that have no satisfying answers. What is the point? What remains after novelty fades? Why does beauty pass so quickly? These questions do not destroy the intelligent, they haunt them. They render even moments of joy slightly dimmer, colored by the awareness that nothing lasts, that everything, no matter how profound, becomes memory too soon. This is not melancholy in the dramatic sense. It is quieter, more persistent, a kind of spiritual erosion that wears down hope in small, steady increments. And while others find comfort in the familiar, the intelligent find themselves suffocating in it, longing for something real, something raw, something that finally feels awake. But in a world built on repetition and performance, that kind of aliveness is hard to find and harder still to hold. 6. Beauty as a temporary refuge when the world becomes unbearable in its repetition, when conversations echo instead of connect and daily rituals lose their meaning. The intelligent often turn to something less tangible but more enduring beauty. Schopenhauer believed that art, music, and philosophy were not mere pastimes for the educated elite, but essential sanctuaries for the burdened mind. In a world that rarely makes sense, these pursuits offer a rare kind of clarity. Not because they solve life's riddles, but because they allow us to step outside them, even if just for a moment. When a piece of music swells with emotion too complex for words, or when a painting captures a silence deeper than thought, something within the intelligent mind breathes. The world doesn't change, but for a while, it softens. These moments do not erase suffering. They suspend it. And in that suspension, a different kind of awareness emerges, one that is less about answers and more about presence. The intelligent are not looking to escape reality. They are looking for glimpses of something more real than what passes for reality. And in the stillness of art, in the precision of a philosophical idea, they find it. But even this refuge is temporary. The music ends. The book closes. The gallery empties. And the weight of existence returns, sometimes heavier than before. Schopenhauer never romanticized this process. He knew that art could not save us from life, but it could illuminate it, showing us not how to escape pain, but how to endure it with grace. Beauty, then, becomes not a luxury, but a lifeline. It offers the intelligent not a solution, but a space brief, fragile, sacred, where the soul can rest before returning to the battle of thought. And perhaps that is enough. Not to conquer suffering, but to witness it without breaking. Not to outrun meaninglessness, but to meet it with open eyes and something like reverence. 7. Detachment is not escape in the search for peace. Most look outward toward achievement, validation, control. But Schopenhauer turned inward, and in doing so, he uncovered a truth that modern life still resists, that the more we desire, the more we suffer. This was not a call to apathy, but to clarity. Detachment, in his view, was not the absence of emotion, but the refusal to let emotion dictate one's relationship with reality. The intelligent suffer not because they feel too little, but because they feel too much tied to outcomes, to ideals, to meanings that never quite materialize. They expect fulfillment from love, permanence from success, transcendence from worldly recognition. And when these things inevitably fall short, they are left not just disappointed, but shattered. Detachment asks something radical of them, to stop expecting the world to deliver what it never promised. To approach life not as a transaction, but as an unfolding. This is not easy. It requires the intelligent to dismantle the very architecture of their identity, the goals, the dreams, the intellectual frameworks they once believed would save them. But in this undoing, something remarkable happens. A quiet begins to emerge. Not a silence of emptiness, but of spaciousness. The world remains the same, but it no longer owns them. They are no longer hostage to its highs and lows. Schopenhauer found in this stance a freedom that did not deny suffering, but made it bearable. He saw detachment not as withdrawal, but as wisdom, the wisdom to witness without clinging, to feel without collapsing. It is the practice of standing in the storm with both eyes open, knowing that nothing can be held forever, and yet still choosing to face it all with dignity. In this way, detachment becomes the first real act of liberation, not from the world, but from the illusion that the world must complete us. 8. Reframing the role of intelligence. What if intelligence was never meant to make life easier, but simply to make it clearer? In a world that rewards intellect with credentials, influence, and applause, it's easy to forget that the true purpose of seeing deeply is not conquest but comprehension. Schopenhauer did not romanticize intelligence. He saw it as a mirror, not a weapon. A tool for reflection, not domination. The intelligent are not here to rise above others, but to perceive the hidden architecture beneath everything: desire, suffering, impermanence, illusion. And that perception, if misunderstood, can feel like a curse. But if embraced fully, It becomes a sacred responsibility. The burden of thought transforms into the grace of awareness. The mind, no longer chasing meaning in hollow places, begins to see meaning in the very act of looking. Intelligence, then, is not about having the answers. It is about learning to sit with the questions without panic, without fleeing. It is about walking through life with a soft gaze, absorbing reality without distorting it through hope or fear. The intelligent do not suffer because they are wrong. They suffer because they believe suffering must mean something is broken. But perhaps nothing is broken. Perhaps this is simply what it means to be awake. To know the futility and still rise. To feel the emptiness and still choose kindness. To see the illusions and still create beauty. In this reframing, intelligence ceases to be a private torment and becomes a quiet offering. Not to the world, but to the self. A promise to remain present. A vow to keep witnessing. A commitment to clarity over comfort. And in that clarity, something new takes root, not happiness in the conventional sense, but wisdom. A wisdom that asks for nothing but changes everything. 9. The sacred function of suffering, for most, is something to be avoided, anesthetized, silenced. But for the intelligent, suffering is not a visitor, it is a companion. And Schopenhauer, with uncompromising honesty, insisted that this companion need not be the enemy. What if pain was not a punishment, but a process? What if it was not the sign of something wrong, but the signal of something real? The intelligent do not merely endure suffering, they analyze it, revisit it, learn its contours. And in doing so, they begin to see that suffering has structure, rhythm, even meaning, not in the narrative sense, but in the existential one. It strips away pretense. It burns down illusions. It clears space for something deeper than comfort, awareness. In this way, suffering becomes sacred. Not because it feels good, but because it reveals what is true. It humbles the mind, opens the heart, and anchors the self in the present. It is through suffering that the intelligent come to understand the human condition not abstractly, but intimately. They see not just their own pain, but the pain that lives in everyone. And in that shared vulnerability, something shifts. The isolation softens. The walls built by intellect begin to crack. Empathy enters. Not as a concept, but as a lived truth. And so, suffering becomes not the barrier to wisdom, but its initiation. The intelligent, who once felt cursed by their depth, begin to realize that depth is not the problem, it is the portal. A passage through which they can move from resistance to surrender, from despair to dignity. This is not redemption in the traditional sense. It is not about healing what hurts, but honoring it, making space for it, letting it shape the soul without hardening the heart. And in this sacred function, suffering becomes not something to run from, but something to walk with, slowly, consciously, together. 10. Liberation beyond the illusion. What remains after the illusions fall away? After the noise quiets, the striving stops, and the mind, no longer seeking, simply sees? For Schopenhauer, and for those willing to think deeply, the answer is not despair, but liberation. True freedom is not found in the absence of suffering, but in the refusal to be defined by it. Intelligence, when guided by attachment, becomes a tormentor. But when tempered by detachment and insight, it becomes a compass pointing not outward toward achievement, but inward toward understanding. The intelligent do not escape the human condition. They feel it more fully. But in feeling it, they also begin to transcend it, not by rising above it, but by entering it completely without resistance. This is not withdrawal. It is awakening. A way of seeing that no longer begs life to be different, but meets it as it is, fleeting, imperfect, beautiful in its unraveling. The liberation Schopenhauer spoke of is not grand or final. It is subtle. It is the breath taken in silence, the clarity found in complexity, the peace that does not erase pain, but lives beside it. To live this way is not easy. It asks us to let go of our deepest hopes and our oldest illusions. But what it gives in return is presence, depth, grace, And for the intelligent who have known the weight of seeing too much, it is perhaps the only form of freedom that truly satisfies. So if you've ever felt like your thoughts were too heavy, your awareness too sharp, your solitude too deep, know that you are not alone. You are simply awake. And with that wakefulness comes a path. Not to happiness in the way the world sells it, but to something far more enduring, a life lived consciously, courageously, and completely. If this message spoke to something in you, if it gave language to a feeling you've long carried, consider sharing it with someone who may need to hear it too. Leave us a comment, not for us, but for those quietly reading, searching for connection in a sea of noise. And if you'd like to explore more ideas like this, subscribe and turn on notifications. We'll be right here, diving deeper, together.